On this Wednesday night, Canada's tougher action on COVID-19. The goal to protect the health of Canadians and the economy.
We as a country are very well positioned to face big challenges.
As Canada's military starts preparing, plus Italy's unprecedented measures. And separation anxiety. A Quebec woman cleared of the virus, but her husband still in the hospital in Japan. A victorious former vice president.
This campaign will send Donald Trump packing.
The new two-way race after Super Tuesday. And 1 year after being diagnosed with cancer.
Now, I'd be lying if I said the journey had been an easy one.
What is Alex Trebek's update on his health?
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Canada is now ramping up the federal response in case what's happening in other countries with COVID-19 starts to happen here. It would strain both our already overstretched healthcare system and the economy. So a special new cabinet committee led by Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland has been set up to tackle it.
The job of this committee is to ensure that Canada is ready and prepared for all eventualities, and we are. We take the COVID-19 outbreak very seriously.
It is natural to be concerned about what COVID-19 might mean for you and your family's health. This is a concern that public health authorities across Canada are taking very seriously, and government at all levels are engaged in the response.
The Bank of Canada also slashed its key interest rate today by 0.5 percentage point, saying the virus is a negative shock to Canada's economic outlook. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but we begin with the outbreak itself. There are now 34 confirmed cases in this country. All are in BC and Ontario, except for one in Quebec. In tonight's top story, David Akin looks at Canada's rapidly evolving response to what is an unprecedented outbreak.
So today we had our first meeting of the Cabinet Committee.
Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland chairs this special committee, but it will be Health Minister Patty Hajdu who will take the lead on a whole-of-government effort to make sure healthcare systems across the country can contain the virus, and if that fails, deal with an outbreak. So far, so good. Cases in Canada, all related to travel, no cases yet of community transmission.
And our discussions and work has focused on ensuring that our surveillance systems are detecting cases and our health systems are prepared for an increased activity.
A key task for public health officials, communicating to Canadians that most COVID-19 infections are mild.
Such patients can be cared for in the community, while reserving, of course, very scarce resources potentially for those who really need it.
Tam says phone ahead before going to the hospital. Now, half of this special committee holds economic portfolios in Trudeau's cabinet. That's no coincidence. Every forecaster, now including the Bank of Canada, says the country's economy will take a hit.
We recognize there are many different people and industries that are seeing challenging situations because of the coronavirus.
That's why opposition MPs are pressing for quick action now on the economic front.
And so what I'm looking for from the government are things like, is there a fiscal stimulus plan? Is there a jobs plan? I'd like to see some support for workers who may have to self-quarantine to make sure that there's some financial compensation for them so that there's not a disincentive to stay at home.
So lots of pressure on the Prime Minister and his COVID-19 committee to rapidly deliver results on both the health front and the economic front. And Donna, there's going to be not much margin for error.
David, there is news tonight about how the Canadian military is preparing in case this outbreak impacts their operations. Tell us about that.
That's right, Donna. A general order went out to the military today because they are getting prepared in case there's a pandemic.
We have two main objectives. One is to preserve the force and our ability to function should there be a pandemic. The other is to support Canadians.
And of course, the military, first of all, has to protect its own members. And so these new orders ban all non-essential travel to countries with an outbreak. And commanders also have the authority to cancel vacations for the troops. The military is also going to review whether it ought to hold large gatherings. Now, second of all, the military has to have plans in place to assist a federal or provincial government or municipal government in trying to deal with a pandemic here. Chief of Defence Staff Jonathan Vance telling Global News that the military is making those plans on the worst case assumption, and that is that they might have as many as 25% of their members could be in quarantine or fighting COVID-19. Donna?
Wise to make worst case scenario plans. David Akin in Ottawa, thanks. The outbreak is already having an impact on supply chains of companies in Canada, and the Bank of Canada is concerned about the economic outlook for this country. So it cut Canada's key interest rate by 0.5 percentage point overnight. It's dropped from 1.75 to 1.25%. That's the first drop since 2015, and it's in line with the cut the U.S. Federal Reserve made yesterday. It's hoped the lower rate will boost consumer confidence and help settle the markets, which have been on a rocky ride over the past week. Today, the TSX closed up 355 points. Doug Porter, the chief economist at BMO, says it's a smart decision given the situation.
Very few people saw Bank of Canada interest rate cuts anywhere close to this soon. So obviously the world has changed in a very short period of time. And I think this is a constructive step in helping to address the risks to the economy from the virus.
The drop in interest rates might help those looking to buy a home or a vehicle, but it won't help cover the costs if your company's employees have to stay home or other parts of your daily life are disrupted by the outbreak. Porter says the rate cut is an immediate step policymakers can take, and they do have other tools they can use further down the road if the economy slides.
If things really do get tough and challenging in the months ahead, there is room certainly at the federal level for the government to either cut taxes or to spend more money to support the economy.
In the U.S., California has now reported its first death from COVID-19, and the governor of that state just declared a statewide emergency. The latest case to be confirmed is a medical worker who was screening passengers at Los Angeles International Airport. Cities like Los Angeles have also declared a public health emergency, which will trigger more state and federal funding to help deal with the outbreak. 11 people have now died in the U.S. There are more than 150 known cases across 16 states. The virus has also spread to America's biggest city. There are now 6 confirmed cases in New York City, including the first case of community spread. A lawyer in his 50s who works in Manhattan has COVID-19, and where he got it is not certain. He has spread it to others. New York's governor says the man's wife, 2 children, and a neighbor who drove him to the hospital, all of whom live in Westchester County, have tested positive. They're now at home in self-isolation, and the man is in critical condition in the hospital.
There are going to be dozens and dozens and dozens of people. And the more people you test, the more people you're going to find.
Public health officials there are now tracing who the newest case came in contact with. Staff at the man's law firm are being monitored. The school and university his children attend have closed temporarily. New York's transit system is ramping up disinfection to try to minimize the spread. The biggest outbreak outside China is still in South Korea. More than 5,600 people have tested positive there, and that's overwhelming the hospitals. At least 32 people have died. To try to stop the chain of transmission, up to 10,000 people a day in South Korea are being tested. This is one way they're going about it, drive-through testing centers. It is quick, it keeps people away from clinics and emergency rooms, and reduces the risk of spreading the infection. South Korea has screened more than 100,000 people. Italy and the UK are 2 other countries to watch. Italy is taking drastic action now. All schools and universities are closing tomorrow for at least 10 days. And for the next month, all sports events, including major rugby and soccer matches, will be played in empty stadiums. There are more than 3,000 confirmed cases in Italy and 107 deaths. And in the UK, the number of positive cases also jumped today to 87. The worst case scenario, says the UK's chief medical officer, is that up to 80% of the population could be infected. Crystal Goomansingh is in London tonight.
Halting education nationwide from preschool to university. Italy's prime minister says the country is fighting with all measures against COVID-19. Giuseppe Conte says we felt it was the right thing to do to suspend educational activity until the 15th of this month. This parent says, I completely agree, and I hoped for this decree because I feared an outbreak in the school. The military is preparing to help care for those who are ill. It shared video from multiple sites being set up. The Italian government warned that no matter how good the health system is, it is at risk of being overburdened. A third red zone is being considered to restrict the movement of people in hopes of slowing the spread of the virus. And there are plans to ban public events and shut down movie theaters, measures that could be in the near future for UK residents.
We're not at the point yet where we are asking large numbers of people to self-isolate.
Knowing compliance could be an issue, Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his Conservative government will bring in legislation giving 3 more days of statutory sick pay for workers who are self-isolating. Hospital emergency rooms in England now have coronavirus pods. They're set up to separate potentially infected people from everyone else. Basically, they're small shed-like structures at the hospital entrance where people can check in. Donna?
All right, Crystal Goomansingh in London, thanks. In other news tonight, another contender has dropped out of the race to be the next president of the United States. Mike Bloomberg, the billionaire former mayor of New York City, has concluded he has no path to victory in the Democratic nomination. He did badly on Super Tuesday, the biggest election day of the Democratic primary calendar, and he's now endorsed former Vice President Joe Biden, who made a huge comeback yesterday. There are now 3 main candidates left in the once crowded field. So where do things go from here? Abigail Bimman picks up the story from Washington.
They don't call Super Tuesday for nothing.
If Bill Clinton was called the comeback kid,
with Joe Biden, it's more like Lazarus. He was dead and buried as far as pundits and even the leadership of the Democratic Party was concerned.
Joe Biden won most Super Tuesday states, including a surprise win in Texas as part of his southern sweep.
I'm here to report we are very much alive. And make no mistake about it, this campaign will send Donald Trump packing.
It was a great comeback for Joe Biden. Incredible comeback when you think about it.
And more Joe-mentum Wednesday as Michael Bloomberg dropped out, the billionaire backing Biden.
I entered the race for president to defeat Donald Trump. And today, I am leaving the race for the same reason.
It isn't that Joe Biden inspires them. It's that they think he might be able to defeat Donald Trump. And that is priority 1, 2, and 3 for the Democrats.
He even won in Massachusetts, where Bernie Sanders spent a lot of time and energy trying to beat Elizabeth Warren. In her home state, she came in third. But Sanders did win the biggest Super Tuesday prize, projected to win California, where results are still coming in.
Joe has his ideas, his record, his vision for the future. I have mine, and I look forward to a serious debate on the serious issues facing this country.
The field has narrowed to a 2-man race, but there's still a long road ahead with more primaries. Next week, 6 states are up for grabs, and blue-collar Michigan will be especially interesting. Sanders won it in 2016, and he's pushing hard for it again. But it was Donald Trump who won the state overall. Donna?
All right, Abigail Bimman in Washington, thanks. The draft deal on rights and title in northern BC. Will the Wet'suwet'en people agree to it? The tough task on their hands. That's coming up. The past months has made clear how much work there is to do on reconciliation in this country and to clear up unresolved issues about Indigenous rights and title, including who has the authority to say yes or no to projects like pipelines. Now, attention is on a new draft deal and whether the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs in BC and the elected band councils will agree to it. Sarah MacDonald reports.
There appears to be a moment of calm in northern BC. A draft deal centered on rights and title, drawn up through intensive talks with government, now left in the hands of this nation and its people.
I'm glad they're doing that because we have to be listened to.
Tasked with coming to a consensus on how to proceed with a proposal that wouldn't impact this project, but would no doubt carry weight moving forward.
When the conditions have been met
to everyone's satisfaction. I don't see how it's possible anyone can actually stop it at this point.
The end of the line for that already fully permitted pipeline, promising economic opportunity to the First Nations along its corridor. Here in Kitimat, where the liquefied natural gas will ultimately be exported to Asian markets.
The skills built on this project are going to be lifelong.
The elected leaders of Haisla Nation, among 20 band councils signing on in a bid to inject their communities with jobs and funding. Something many Wet'suwet'en are also seeking, as a power struggle over leadership leaves this nation divided.
We empathize with their community. Unfortunately, most First Nations communities do endure those types of disagreements when it comes to leadership.
Difficult and deeply personal work that now needs to be resolved internally within Wet'suwet'en Nation.
We want all our elders and the young people to work together.
Away from the world stage it largely never asked to be on. Sarah MacDonald, Global News, Whitsett, BC.
Torture memo still ahead, a Canadian man's tale of abuse in an Egyptian prison. There's a call for help tonight from a Canadian man who came to this country as a refugee and found himself behind bars in Egypt, accused of espionage. Without friends or family to champion his cause, Joseph El Attar has been largely forgotten. Now, in a series of letters, he alleges Egyptian authorities have tortured him, and he's begging the Canadian government for help. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stevenson has the story.
This is Joseph El Attar in 2007. It was the last time he was seen in public, proclaiming his innocence, before he was locked up in a notorious Egyptian prison. Accused of being an Israeli spy by the Egyptian government, El Attar did confess, but in court shouted out the confession was extracted under torture.
Immediately, all sorts of flags from a human rights perspective.
Senior Canadian government and intelligence officials told Global News El Attar is no undercover operative. Former Deputy Director of CSIS, Andy Ellis, has personally taken up his case.
There is no truth to the allegations that he was working for the Israelis or working for anyone else.
Officials believe El Attar was targeted over his beliefs and his conversion to Christianity.
It's a tragedy. It's a Canadian tragedy.
In a highly unusual move, CSIS, Canada's intelligence agency, approached Amnesty International, encouraging them to take on El Attar's case. Years later, nothing has changed, and El Attar is issuing a cry out loud from the prison, condemning the silence of the Canadian government on my torture, he says, in letters penned from prison obtained by Global News. What is happening here is against all human rights charters, El Attar says.
He was forced to drink his own urine. He was tortured very severely.
The mistreatment has continued, that the prison conditions have been very, very hard for him to endure.
Yes,
Majed El-Shafi is the Toronto church leader who El Attar has been writing to.
He is asking for help. He's in a very dark spot, and he's simply asking for help.
El Attar is not alone. Government memos obtained by Global News reveal over 24 Canadians detained in foreign countries have made credible allegations of torture to the federal government since 2014.
The Canadian government needs to make this case a top priority, and that means for Minister Champagne, that means for the Prime Minister.
Canadian government sources say they are pushing hard behind the scenes for El Attar's freedom and have been doing so for years. But there is no sense that Egyptian authorities are open to releasing him before the end of his sentence or even possibly after it. But they hope that having his case raised in public may help El Attar in the future. Mercedes Stevenson, Global News, Ottawa.
Next, a Quebec couple separated during the COVID-19 outbreak, still stuck in Japan.
The one-year survival rate for stage 4 pancreatic cancer patients is 18%. I'm very happy to report I have just reached that marker.
Very happy indeed, and remarkable. Jeopardy host Alex Trebek, who is 79, is celebrating a milestone since his diagnosis of cancer.
There were moments of great pain, days when certain bodily functions no longer functioned, and sudden massive attacks of Great Depression that made me wonder if it really was worth fighting on.
Trebek credits his medical treatment, his faith in God, and the prayers of millions of fans for getting him to this point, plus the support from his soulmate, his wife, Jean. Another couple, a husband and wife from Quebec, have also been each other's support systems during a health crisis. They were passengers on board the Diamond Princess, the cruise ship that became a hotspot for COVID-19. They both tested positive and ended up in different Japanese hospitals. And as Mike Armstrong reports, they're anxious for their unexpected stay in that country to come to an end.
As vacation photos go, Manon Trudel and Julien Bergeron have been collecting some odd ones. Most over the last couple of weeks have involved Japanese healthcare workers in masks. But then came these ones Tuesday. Bergeron in his hospital room, his wife outside. It was the first time they'd seen each other in more than a week. It was about 10 days, Trudel says. It was so long. They spent all day Tuesday speaking to each other over cell phones through the window. Now, when the couple got off the Diamond Princess, Bergeron had already tested positive for COVID-19. Trudel had not, but she wasn't leaving her husband behind in Japan, sick. They were taken to a hospital in the city of Toyota, about 260 kilometers west of Tokyo. That's when the strange photographs started, and the situation got worse. A few days later, Trudel tested positive as well. Communications in hospital are over an iPad translation app, and it's been difficult. Trudel's limited English, translated to Japanese and back, didn't always work. She didn't mean to ask, for example, "Is my husband from my hometown expensive?" Another complication was that the app doesn't include the term coronavirus. Trudel says when she asked if she had the coronavirus, it was translated as, "Do I have cocaine?" She says everyone laughed. That wasn't her question. Trudel has now tested negative for COVID-19 twice. She's free and living in a hotel, but Bergeron's recovery has been slowed by pneumonia in both lungs. The cruise ship company is picking up their bills for now, and they still don't know when this trip might end. Trudel says they missed a family member's funeral last week, they'll miss a friend's funeral next week, and at the end of the month, they have a new grandchild expected. They'd very much like to be home for that. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Whiteshell Provincial Park in Manitoba. We'd love to see your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.